I've been at SolarWinds for 7 years, and prior to that I was in IT. I've done networking, systems administration, a little bit of everything. And I was actually a customer prior to joining the team. So I've done a lot of different things, a lot of geeky things. So when I actually started, our portfolio was pretty thin. We focused on network configuration management, performance of the network, bandwidth analyzation, things like that. Since then, we've expanded our portfolio to systems and virtualization. So today what we're actually going to talk about is the application stack. Joel Dolizzi, who is our CTO, presented back in August a concept of how we actually bring all of these components together to be able to identify where the root cause is from an application perspective. So this is, the application is impacted, and I'm looking at a dashboard that goes all the way down to the storage infrastructure. So it's all contextual and mapping. So I can select a data store and determine which virtual machines are actually hosted on that data store. So we're actually delivering that this quarter. We're really excited about it. So Joel's going to walk us through the architecture and design of it, and we'll go into the product demonstration from there. Good?
Yep. Hi, everyone. So the first thing that I want to give is a little bit of overview about, the platform that we use right now for different products. Because if you go to our website, it's kind of easy to actually get confused about the fact that we have around 28 products on our, kind of website right now, roughly. And it kind of looks like they are all standalone products that don't communicate or integrate with any of them. And, so I'm going to drive you a little bit through some, kind of high-level architecture of how those things are put together. And that's going to make more sense for you to understand how AppStack after that is working. So if you think about it from a really kind of low-level perspective, we have a platform. Does everybody sees, correctly with the camera?
Yeah, just don't bring it in front of the projector, please.
Okay, we'll get there then. So we have what we call our platform, which often is referred to using the name Orion. And Orion used to be Orion NPM, which was our network performance monitoring product. That's what the company really kind of started, really kind of getting into the server-based or kind of the web-based interface. And it's still one of the big products that we have. And so it runs on top of Orion. So I'll basically, network, and basically that's our NPM product. So the role of that product is really to kind of gather a bunch of data, primarily using SNMP and CLI, and basically kind of bubble up the kind of relevant information about traffic, interface utilization, those type of things. Things that are relevant from a system perspective, we have another product that runs on top of Orion, which is our app and server product called SAM. And it used to be called a long time ago APM when we launched this product back in kind of 2008 timeframe. And the role of that product is really to gather everything that's inside the OS. So OS and all the metrics that are then kind of bubbled up by the OS, and then things like WMI or JMX or things like that are basically kind of exposed to that kind of product. So whenever you see things that are really kind of application-centric within the AppStack discussion later, things will be coming from this product. Then what we are doing also is we have a bunch of other product that runs on top of the networking stack here. We have things like, our NTA product, which is primarily for flow data. So everything that is SFlow, NetFlow, JFlow, and whatnot, IPFix, all of those are basically gathered by this product and basically then bubbled up also using our networking stack. One of the things that, over the years, one of the things that we have done is we have acquired quite a bit of a few companies. I think overall we are kind of, since I started, we have acquired 15 companies. One of those, was a company called Hyper9. And they basically had a virtualization product, which is, kind of the context for our kind of presentation today. This product was running on its own platform into a virtual appliance, using a completely different stack than the one that SolarWinds used for, the Orion platform. And basically, over the years, what we're doing is basically migrating that product from their native platform to move on top of the Orion platform, so that basically customers end up with common reporting. Report is part of this. primarily, a common GUI, because people want single pane of glass for a lot of the data. There's a lot of, obviously people don't just, users don't just look at, charts all day long. They also like to have, correlated alerts between different parts of their stack. So, alerting is a big part of why we are moving those products on top of the Orion platform, so that basically I can define in one place the alerts that I care about, and basically they can cover my server and apps, and they can cover my virtualization needs, and so on. So I'll probably add some, there's obviously also all the AAA, I would say, so security with, authentication, authorization, and auditing. That's all done also at the Orion platform level. So whenever you're running one of those products on top of it, you basically kind of get access to all the features that are part of our platform. The other thing that we've done over the years is we've defined, an API layer that basically is a single point of access to all of the products that are running on top of this. They basically kind of interact with that API. They augment that API when you install a new product, and basically kind of, there's a very single way and consistent way of getting data out of the Orion platform. Doesn't matter how many products you have running on top of that. It's very extensible. And we started with, a SOAP-based interface for this, and now we are basically, as everybody else is moving towards more of a RESTful, more web and kind of low-touch and easy-to-consume type of interface. So we've moved towards a REST-JSON type of interface. So let me go back to the product that are running on top of that. So, we acquired Hyper9 back, 3 years ago, 4 years, something like that. And what we've been doing is we've been creating a virtualization module, as they call them, which is really a product on top of Orion, but it's basically migrating, a lot of the features that are currently into the virtualization product that we acquired from Hyper9, but we are migrating that on top of the Orion platform. The benefit that you have is that now, automatically by basically migrating that on top of the Orion platform, those things are basically kind of automatically, bubbling up inside that AppStack visualization and linking with other entities. So for instance, if I've got a VM or a hypervisor that is identified by the virtualization product, and the app and server product basically is monitoring the OS on one of those VMs, well, guess what? We know that that OS maps to a VM that basically is coming from the other one, and bang, we have a link between those entities. And so this allows us to actually, if you think about it, and if you have, if you've got a VM with, an OS running into it, and you've got an app running into it, I don't know if you're going to be able to see in this, but basically, and that's talking to, a database, a VM that's running, another OS, and here it's running SQL Server, for instance. All of those boxes that I'm showing up there, we are all representing them as first-class citizen entities within our platform. And so we know that there's a relationship between, actually even between the hypervisor that, is basically hosting both of those VMs. So we know that, okay, there's a server in a rack somewhere, and basically it's running a hypervisor, whether it's, vSphere or it's Hyper-V. We know that there are two VMs that are running on top of that. We both are monitoring also the OS that's inside of that using our server and application product. And we know also that there might be IIS running in one of those instance, and we know also that that IIS application is accessing SQL Server. And so all of those things basically are related to each other. And so basically what happened is, based on the API, there's a very rich set of metadata that represents really the relations between all of those entities. It's not just about, getting a flat list of entities that we know about. We actually have the connection points between all of those entities that we know about. And just as an example, actually 2 weeks ago, we still had a bug in the product, before, getting it to release, where we ended up with a mismatch between the data stores mapped to the VM that basically were of relevance. And actually we had the data in the API. Yeah. It's just that the application at the UI level was not exploiting those relationships. And basically, developers on the team took, part of an evening to actually go back and figure out, oh, you know what, we actually have the data. We can actually get that solved. And basically, we basically end up with a very rich set of data that actually solve, very kind of customer-focused problem. Because we can give you, if we take one VM, I can show you the hypervisor that it's running on, but I can also show you all the data stores, for instance, that it basically is related to. And so that's very important to be able to show contextual data about any of those kind of, entities, because otherwise you're just showing flat list. And if people, if customers have to do themselves the correlation, that's our job. They have other stuff to do.
Yeah, so this dashboard is basically all relationships regardless of where we're pulling that information. So the queries that we're making, it's basically contextual data metrics that we're putting together to be able to show the event correlation.
That's right, yeah. So for each of those, we have, if you want, we have an object model that represents, okay, we have a hypervisor. And, if you know a little bit of UML, representation, basically a hypervisor has multiple VMs. A VM can have an OS on it. An OS can have multiple multiple application on it, and that's kind of how we build this model. Basically, we are keeping all of that metadata inside our API, and we are basically, as you add more products, it makes the API object model that much better. Like for instance, I'm going to add another product here, which basically is a storage product. So before Hyper9, we acquired another company called Tech Tools at the time that has a storage product. Basically very deep information about arrays, LUNs, things like that, disk, and really kind of in-depth, performance and configuration data around storage. And basically what we are doing is the exact same treatment as we did for the Hyper9 product. We are migrating that on top of the Orion platform, and basically we are making, a storage product here. And guess what happened when you do that? Basically, we extend the data model here because now that storage product brings its own set of entities that are also linked to the old ones that we have in the system. So now the Hyper-V here, the hypervisor, is connected typically to some data stores. You've got, VMs are usually associated with VMDKs. A data store points to, typically a LUN. A LUN belongs to, an array. And then there's, every vendor then has its kind of own take on how to represent arrays and basically disk and groupings, various levels of groupings and RAID groups and stuff like that. And in the end, you end up with disks. And so the whole point is that, when you install the storage product on top of Orion, basically when you install the storage product, you never see really Orion in there. But there's a platform between that's being shared across all the products. And what happened is, all of those things here, the LUN array and all that stuff, that basically is added at runtime by the storage product. And then, the data store here and the VM and the VM, the hypervisor and the data store, that's all added by the virtualization product. And so on. And so there's really kind of a very loose coupling between all those products. They don't really know about each other. The only thing they know is that they extend base entities and base concepts that another product may be using, but they don't rely necessarily on the other product being there to be able to work.
Yep.
So while you're assembling Voltron out of SKUs here, does the Orion interface provide you some kind of holistic view on the UML model that you're building of everything? Because I mean, this is super powerful if you have that view. If you have all these products, you can look at arbitrary levels of definition. That's a great question. We have Orion by itself is really geared at solving particular problem and use cases. So it's never been a Swiss Army knife at the UI level. So we don't expose that directly out of the Orion product. But we have an API and we have an SDK that basically can be downloaded from, I think it's the Track community or it's on the website somewhere, where basically there we actually have a browser that basically allows you to kind of browse all of the information that is exposed from the API. And so with that, it's very similar in look and feel to SQL Server Management Studio. It's got the same kind of concepts where basically on the left-hand side, you'll see all of your entities. It's kind of very Explorer-centric. So you point it to an API server and basically give your credentials. And basically, the next thing it does is it pumps all the metadata that API server has. And basically, it's an introspection API, so you can see everything that it knows about all the products.
and then you can run queries directly from there. Basically, it uses the REST API or the SOAP API, depending on which bindings you use. And so, in short, the answer is not directly in Orion, but we have a tool that basically allows you to explore that information. And the interesting thing is that not a lot of people really know about those capabilities, because that's not how we go to market. Again, going back to who SolarWinds is, this is not historically, we are not a platform provider, but that should not equate the fact that we have not developed a platform to run our product. It's just, basic, I would say ROI. If we ended up having to replicate all this stack for every single one of the product, it just wouldn't make sense.
So you would lose the cohesion, sorry.
So, sorry. Is Orion a database that holds all the information from the storage, virtualization, app, and network products in one place, but the UI is then presented? Are there 4 different UIs for those examples, for the network, for the AppStack virtualization and storage?
That's a great question. Basically, Orion is more than the database. Orion is really, I would call, Orion is all the middleware that is around the database, and it also owns the schema inside the database server. So it owns all the data that lives into an external database. We don't, for our trial evaluation, we ship with Microsoft SQL Express that basically is then installed behind the scenes, and you don't even see it as a potential evaluator. But after that, for I would say licensed version, we really recommend for you to move to a version of SQL Server that is kind of properly licensed and also kind of has not the limitation that SQL Express has. But basically, think of it as Orion communicates with that database. It knows about all the data that's inside the database. So I guess.
Yeah, I think I probably phrased the question incorrectly. I didn't mean in a pure database format.
Yeah.
You're obviously using SQL, Oracle, whatever you like. But is Orion the data repository?
So yes, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. And basically, that's what we get with kind of this concept of every product basically expand the schema that Orion knows about. And Orion maintains that schema and maintains collecting data for those entities and be able to visualize them after that in the UI. And so the way this works is, the UI layer here is, if you were to install Orion by itself, the only thing that Orion really knows about itself is how to manage nodes. IP address on the network. That's the only thing really kind of that Orion as a platform really knows about. And so what those products here end up doing is, if you think about it, they are an aggregation, they are a grouping of some UI widgets, a schema definition so that Orion knows what to store and what to collect, a couple of plugins that are needed for collecting data, so that if it's a protocol that we don't know about in Orion, then Orion is expanded in order to be able to kind of connect to those devices using that protocol, and then some reports definition, and then some alerts. Because out of the box, we want to provide solutions that are meaningful for solving specific problems. And so typically, like some of the original ones are, if you are going above the 95th percentile of CPU utilization, we'll raise an alert for that, because typically that is a situation that, people want to know about. Same thing for interface utilization, on the networking side, we'll have predefined alerts for that. But then customers can basically go and define their own dashboards within Orion, define their own alerts, define customized, reports that are out there. So that's kind of the way Orion.
So with Orion being the intelligence, the storage of knowing all of the information, does it have that intelligence that takes it steps further as a correlation engine to say, because you'll know CPU is high, you'll know memory or network is high, but will it know that CPU is high due to this other event that's going on and actually correlate those for root cause?
So actually, we don't have a generalized version of that, but for specific things, yes, it does. We will have some basic correlation that is done between some metrics when we know it makes sense. As you know, just basic root cause analysis and correlation of data in a very generic manner is something that is very complicated to do, because it's very error prone, because the problem that you're missing is context. You don't know what the intent of what you were trying to do there is. And so
But you do, though, because the product knows all of the information, therefore it can start to make assumptions, and then take them based upon those assumptions to know this virtual machine sits on this data store. Chances are, if I'm having problems with this data store, if I'm having problems with this virtual machine, by merit of correlation, the two could be related.
Absolutely, but what you described there is a very specific context for that correlation. So I totally agree with you.
That's the first example, but because it knows everything, it's the intelligence the product brings, and we, as end users, go and use that to help us and be more empowered end users in an organization.
Absolutely, and I think that that's definitely, you know, we have, as I said, we have some of those use cases and context covered, some of the other ones we don't. The thing that we are trying to do is not trying to find and go to market saying, we have the correlation engine that's going to solve all of your problems, because first of all, users are very doubtful about those solutions. It takes a lot of time for convincing them that you have it right, and most of the time anyway, you're wrong. So, you know, when you try to actually kind of provide a generic correlation sense there.
Until I think like from the networking perspective, so we actually released DPI, Deep Packet Inspection, which provides us a step in the direction for that, so determines whether there's application response time issues or network related issues. And from that, we're able to drill into different parts of the application to determine where the source of the issue is. So it's not all in one pretty space, but it is, you're able to navigate to it.
I suppose when we see it later and visualize it, it'll probably make it.
Is the intention long term to do that, because if you have ties directly into the application, how the application's running, you know, actions there, and then you have ties to the virtual machine that's running on the virtual machine and all the elements it's using, network, storage, compute, etc., then and you have, you know, where it's going to and an end user client connectivity, you should, out of all that, be able to start making assumptions and start to say you are impacted in this way, but there's a good chance you're impacted because of some other thing that you weren't even thinking of looking at, because you're collecting all of the data. You're the master of the data.
Yeah, and for instance, we will use that, for instance, in alerts. You know, if you know that the hypervisor is down, don't alert me if the 25 VMs that are running on that hypervisor are down also. I already know that. It's the same thing on the networking side. We do the exact same thing where we have, you know, the concepts of, if we know that those network devices are behind this router and this router is down, don't alert me that my 25 switches behind are basically down. I already know about this if you tell me that this guy is down, because they're all feeding out of the data that's coming from this router.
And that's in a disaster and critical scenario. When things are down, we have a good sense, hey, something may be down, but the bigger picture that most organizations suffer through is something is slow or perceived to be slow. And so instead of just simply, you know, an alert, we're talking like stoplights, red, green, yellow, etc. We have a sense of where the state of that application or environment is and what its concurrent state over time is. So we have an idea that, hey, this is abnormal activity for this application or through these various components. And again, I'm just looking at the bigger picture. You know, as you have more and more data, then you've got big data that goes into it, and you can do a lot more analytics against that information to.
That is definitely the goal of expanding, basically, you know, and solving more and more and answering more and more of those questions, basically, with the data that we have.
That's the goal of Orion, big term, as we collapse everything into it.
That's the goal of all of those products, because again, you know, in the end, if those products have the need to actually be able to, you know, really kind of zoom in and do that correlation, then basically that feature will most likely move into Orion, or that, you know, kind of additional knowledge that is needed move into Orion. Not every single product typically kind of it's dumbed down to a bunch of UI pieces, a few alerts, things like that. Those alerts will expose, you know, triggering conditions, and those, of course, will then, you know, for the triggers to be, you know, triggered, that logic will live somewhere in Orion.
I mean, organizationally, companies today support their environment by having a tool that monitors their network, having a tool that monitors their virtualization environment, maybe having a tool that monitors their application, maybe some that monitors their storage. And when there's a problem, all right, let's launch the 50 tools and try and figure it out.
Where is it? Yep.
Right.
Or spend 3 lifetimes writing Nagios, you know, lists.
Because we're poor.
Right. We have 3 lifetimes to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
Any other questions? We're good? Cool. So I think those are the major pillars right now that are running on top of Orion. And there's the latest one that we've done, an acquisition last year, which is around databases, you know, where, what's the name of the company?
DPA, Confio.
Oh, Confio, that's right. All right. So we acquired this company last year, back in I think November of 2013. Sorry, and basically what this product does is that it gives great visibility at query execution times, locks on the databases, why are my queries slow, but really really from the DBA perspective and even the developer perspective to be able to understand where is the slowness coming from. And so part of this also is to bring that data set inside Orion, and basically eventually have a product also that runs on top of it, and that basically is database centric. And again, if you think about this, that means that we extend the metadata model that we know about the environment. It just gets augmented by database specific metrics and data points, and now basically that's all goodness for this view there, because the minute we add that there, we're going to have another row down there that will show you databases and some additional deep dive inside that database that may be related to a VM that's running there, or a data store that the database has an extent running on, or things like that. So that's kind of where, that's the idea basically, is kind of rinse and repeat with kind of new products that we bring to market. So
we also have web performance in that for transactions.
Yep.
That's right. So I'm going to put it somewhere here. So on top of Orion also, don't take it that it runs on top of those products, but we have a web performance monitoring, tool. So you also I don't know if you guys know, but we also acquired Pingdom back in June of last year, basically. So they're really kind of another part of the business right now, and they don't need to be kind of confused with this WPM product. This WPM product really runs on top of the Orion platform and is integrated within the GUI with our server and application monitoring product and all that. And so the beauty of this is that it really kind of completes this kind of, view of, okay, now I've got, basic baselines of what my user should be expecting, of accessing my web applications and stuff like that from the web. I have, the virtualization platform is monitored by a virtualization product. Within those virtual, the OS and the apps are being monitored by the app and server monitoring. We are starting to be able to stitch all of those things together back from a transaction that may have been slow, that has been detected by the WPM product. And basically it's getting into a hypervisor that is connected to a storage. And now basically we have all of those things that are connected to each other inside the Orion platform, and we can basically bubble those in type of informations within a screen like this, where Kevin's going to drive you more into that demo.
Are you positioning this like a machine learning then? Like all these logs and events and flows will go into this engine, and then eventually, is this going to be like a machine learning platform?
I guess you could label it that way if you want. I'm always worried about those terms like big data and things like that, because they're so overloaded. But yeah, I mean, we are learning about the environment, and basically we are taking action based on what we learn from the environment. So you can definitely label it that way. But it basically is just, kind of connecting data, connecting the dots, and you can't only do that if you really have a good understanding of how things are related to each other. Because I think the weak point of a lot of monitoring systems is that you see them and they collect a bunch of data, but those things, they are not first-class citizens in their own. What they focus on are the metrics themselves and not what those metrics relate to. Because if I don't know that that metric really relates to a CPU and the CPU is related to a host, then I can't really kind of connect the dots between each other when I have an issue.
Can you do with WPM? Can you do like synthetic transactions? Yeah. So you can then just measure, end to end
time.
That's exactly what it is. Yep.
So just one question on it. You're saying it like everything's integrating into Orion, but then you're saying everything's not integrated to Orion. So I just want to clear it. Which things are integrated into Orion as part of this larger single management interface?
Everything that I've talked about right now outside Pingdom, Pingdom is the only thing that is not integrated on top of Orion for the discussion that we have here. Mm-hmm. We have a few tools also like Dameware and things like that you'll find on the website that are not integrated. They are not Orion products. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, the network performance monitoring product, the server and application monitoring product, virtualization is but 75% there, no.
So that's moving into, because up
Yes.
until this point, it's a standalone product, right?
Storage
is going
we have, we are coming out with a brand new version that runs on top of Orion as well. Doesn't have all the array support that the old product have, but that's something that we are working on right now. WPM runs on top of Orion. We have a bunch of networking product. NTA runs on top of Orion. IPAM, IP Address Manager, runs on top of Orion. UNDP or
DPI.
DPI? Yes, DPA basically doesn't run right now on top of Orion. That's the one that doesn't.
So basically you're saying that Orion is the base. These were all separate products before, and going forward and even into the future, you're working hard to integrate them far more with using Orion as the
That's
base.
right, yes.
product to rule them all.
Yeah, and the difficult thing for us is that we are so focused on messaging around the products themselves that we never talk about the platform that is running behind them, and so it's easily kind of glanced over when you go to our website to think that I'm looking for the networking product or I'm looking for the server and application mode, and I can't really tell that they have things in common. And that's by design, because that's how our go-to-market to some extent, because we really focus on, use case and particular, problem solving, and we really we wanted to separate ourselves from the big four that have been historically very platform-centric, because typically what they ask you to do first is to install a platform and then to install products on top of that. And that's something that we wanted to stay away from, because our customers don't need to know necessarily that there's a platform there that basically is, connecting all the dots for them.
And our engineering team runs in parallel. So we have teams that are focused on bringing these applications that are not native on core. They're building more and more of that functionality on core, while we're also working on feature functionality. So we're not stalled in one area.
Yep. Nevertheless, it really seems like you guys are building a pretty solid platform for basically inter-process communication. Have you considered opening it? So, to kind of submit to the app storification of the world and saying, hey, if you want to do something cool with this, bulk of knowledge that we have about an infrastructure, awesome, just let us use what you find and build the, into the object too?
This is something that we've had discussions around, and I think the company, we always talk about SolarWinds being a model company in terms of, we have a very specific go-to-market model. And so a lot of those things have not been very compatible historically with that model, but the model evolves also over time. And I think that we are at a point now where you see a lot of SaaS vendors have APIs in terms of, because they want to be, that's the way you need to kind of interact with them anyway, if you want to send or retrieve any type of information. One other thing is, we are talking about, making the API, for instance, much more of a first-class citizen, and having really kind of that being, something that is part of the offering, just because it's there, and allowing people to interact a lot more freely with it than what it is right now. Right now, you have to kind of go to a THWAC forum and then ask for, the download link to the bits, and then that's how you get support. And so it's there, you're going to get supported. It's just a little bit slightly different than all of the other products, basically, and we're trying to get to a point where this becomes more of a vehicle for people to interact with that. We have, several hundreds of actually customers that are using the API on a daily basis to actually integrate with things like, PowerShell scripts, Python, Ruby, any of those. We have bindings and we have examples for a lot of those on how to interact, and basically just how do you add a new node, for instance? How do you, basically perform tasks like, this node, I know it needs to be unmanaged from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. because I'm going to be working on it, but I have another system that deals with that. Well, we have people doing that, and through the API. Yeah. And so our goal is to really kind of get this as, the way that it's another set of use cases that we can fulfill, and also really kind of getting it to be, really 100% of what those products are using. Because right now, the API came out after some of those products were out, so they have entry points that are slightly different, but our goal is to catch up and really kind of get the API being, there's one API. Whether you are our products or you are third party that want to interact with SolarWinds, there's one API. There's not one that is more advanced for us or whatnot. There's just one of them. It just makes sense for us because it's less maintenance, and if it works for us, it should work for others. And so we kind of need to, that's kind of still a little bit of to-do work for us, but we are on our way to actually get there.
Okay. So are you guys going to continue down the path of keeping each component separated out instead of going back to the way everything was always stacked on the same system? You know,
yeah, I think that's
the goal. It sounds like you're going to continue down that path. Obviously, you do virtual appliances for storage management and things like that.
Never. First of all, I wouldn't say never. You know, kind of going back to the well like we've been. We've had discussions of, you know, particularly with the move to, you know, converged infrastructure, for instance, where, you know, people are buying all-in-one systems with, you know, CPU, storage, network, all-in-one, and this. There seems to be a need for an all-in-one packaging of things where you also have simpler metrics in terms of licensing, where you basically have just a very kind of simple, you know, kind of dimension of licensing that product. All I can tell you is we're working on that. I can give you really kind of more details on timelines and stuff like that, but yes, we are definitely thinking about that. But it's not an or.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we are abandoning any of the things that we've been very successful with, but there are a set of use cases that are, you know, very kind of, particularly in the converged infrastructure kind of market, where people like to see everything in one and don't want to assemble the Lego blocks themselves. They want to have everything into one. So
where you still have the option in a big enterprise, where
and you'll still have
separated out and continue.
You'll still have the a la carte product where the network guys doesn't want to buy anything else than the networking product.
Right.
Come and you'll find your product.
And failover engines and all that are still going to apply across the board.
They'll apply to obviously the small as well as the unified.
So that's the other thing is, you know, here in the Orion, that you've got all the polling, you know, is done from the Orion platform. So none of those products have to actually worry about polling. All the polling infrastructure is done directly inside the Orion platform. They've got the concept of additional pollers, you know, that you can kind of, you know, deploy within your enterprise, either for scale or for reach problems that are basically also part of this platform.
So can I just check, the AppStack name, is that Orion as a platform with all the other modules on top? Is that what AppStack is?
So think about each of those products as being an enabler for AppStack. And then if you, let me just, there is...
Basically, this is like the meeting point.
Yeah.
So as Kevin walks through the demonstration, he'll point out to each of these resources, if you will, there's certain metrics that we're pulling from different applications. So
is AppStack the unified?
Yeah, think about it as a unified.
That brings the comprehensive dashboard that brings it together.
Do you have a bundled SKU for it?
It's part of Core. So it's
Okay.
part of SAM. It's part of Virtualization Manager. Yeah, built in.
Yeah, so there are features inside Orion Core. That's how we call the core of the platform that basically are, you know, AppStack related. And then when each of those products that are AppStack enabled are installed, then automatically they play within the AppStack set of features that are part of the platform, and suddenly you have things like this. This dashboard, for instance, is managed by the Orion Core platform, but every single one of those products that play in here are basically playing and participating into that.
Okay. And the network, and you may get to this, so as far as going back to the networking modules, I know it. How far down the path of NSX integration have you guys came with the networking piece?
That's a great question, because I think it's also something that we would like to go. I would certainly like to see it done faster. The problem that you're looking at right now is how many customers are really running NSX. Right. You know, according to VMware, it's at best, you know, 300 to 400, you know, kind of things. At least as part of the latest numbers that I got from them, you know, which is probably 2 months ago, which was already the double what they had at VMworld, which means that they are growing relatively fast. But if you think about it, for us, when we are typically a volume play, 300 or 400 customers, you know, if we can get our typical market share out of that, that is a relatively small number. Now, we totally believe that from a virtualization networking perspective, we need to have something with, you know, NSX capable, and NSX need to bubble up in a lot of those products, you know, whether it's in the networking product or the virtualization product as well, because, you know, when you think about it and you look at how easy it is to actually get stuff up and running with NSX, it just makes, it's only a matter of time before that thing will really hit critical mass, and we don't really want to be behind the 8 ball at that point for us to be, you know, relevant in that market. So, it's something that, I've got teams that are working on more forward-looking stuff. That's something that one of my team is kind of, currently looking at and interact actually with VMworld on some of those things. And so, again, there, stay posted. Eventually, we'll have more stuff.
At least a year out, potentially, at least.
It's hard.
No timeline.
It's hard. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's sad thing about public
it.
companies is you can't really kind of give any type of guidance like that. But so the problem is I don't even know myself when that's going to be there. So any other questions before we kind of transition to some of the demo?
Let's do the demos. Perfect.
Demo. We'll ask the questions during the demo.
So is AppStack new?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, AppStack is a brand new concept, but basically yes.
Sorry, when you say concept, is that a product?
Features.
A feature.
It's a feature
Features.
built inside.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's got a /AppStack. It's a product.
The dashboard essentially.
Yeah, it's a set of dashboards. The way it bubbles up. The what?
It's a function of Orion.
Yes.
Technically, it is a function of Orion.
Yes, it is.
What storage providers do you have good insight to? Is it NetApp?
NetApp,
Yeah, so there's NetApp, EMC,
EMC,
IBM, HP, Hitachi.
Dell.
Good
There's
visibility
Dell.
into NFS, because a lot of times they'd be like, if you got fiber channel or iSCSI, we got you. NFS,
NFS is also in there as well.
SMB3?
They don't tailor.
I don't think so.
Microsoft
There's tips around here.
HDB, what is that? There's
not-
SIFs.
That's not a true enterprise solution.